All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to fundamentally shift how you view wealth. Look, if you've ever thought that financial success means you have to be some kind of math genius or an absolute wizard with spreadsheets, prepare to have your mind changed. Today, we're exploring some absolutely brilliant concepts from Morgan Housel, proving that doing well with money isn't really about what you know, it's actually about mastering your own behavior. Let's start with a mind-bending paradox. On one hand, we have Ronald Reed. Now, Ronald was a rural janitor and gas station attendant who hitched rides to high school. But when he died at age 92, he had a net worth of over $8 million. Now, on the other hand, we have Richard Fiscone. This guy was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA, widely praised for his brilliant business savvy. He retired in his 40s to this massive mansion. And yet, after the 2008 financial crisis, Fiscone declared bankruptcy. He literally lost everything. So you really have to wonder, how in the world does a humble janitor amass a multi-million-dollar fortune while a highly educated finance executive completely loses his shirt? Well, the answer to that exact question brings us right to the core premise of Morgan Housel's phenomenal book, The Psychology of Money. Housel argues that finance is not a hard science governed by unbreakable laws like physics or chemistry. It's actually a soft skill, heavily dictated by human emotion and behavior. Which leads us perfectly into Section 1, Behavior Beats Intelligence. We really need to stop looking at personal finance like it's a math problem and start looking at it like psychology, where our internal wiring is what dictates our outcomes. This beautifully simple quote really hits the nail on the head. Ronald Reed was patient, Richard Fiscone was greedy. I mean, think about that for a second. The massive gap in education, networking, and experience between these two men was completely neutralized by their basic behavioral traits. In what other industry could someone with zero formal training massively outperform a Harvard-trained executive? You would never, ever see a janitor step in and perform a better open heart surgery than a trained surgeon. No way. But in the world of investing, it happens. So if behavior is the ultimate key here, and it clearly has the power to override intelligence, we've got to ask ourselves, why do people, even incredibly smart, highly educated people, constantly seem to make such irrational, self-destructive financial choices? Well, the answer brings us to our next section. Why no one is crazy. The counterintuitive truth here is that nobody is actually acting crazy when it comes to money. Instead, we're all just reading from scripts written by our vastly different life experiences. Think about it like this. Imagine you were born in 1950. The stock market basically went absolutely nowhere during your teens and 20s, your most formative years. Now imagine you were born in 1970. The market grew almost tenfold during that exact same stage of your life. Or take inflation. Born in 1960, you watch prices triple in your youth. Born in 1990, inflation was practically non-existent for most of your life. These are two completely different sets of people, separated only by the sheer luck of their birth year, and they're going to go through life with completely different tolerances for risk and totally different views of how the economy works. Which means your personal microscopic sliver of life experience ends up overwhelmingly defining your entire mental model of how money works. You might personally only experience 0.000000001% of world history, but that tiny, almost invisible fraction forms 80% of how you think the world operates. So what seems totally crazy to you might actually make perfect sense to someone else based on the era, the economy, and the household they grew up in. To really build some empathy around this concept, let's look at something that seems completely illogical on the surface. Why would a broke person who is genuinely struggling to afford daily necessities go out and spend their money on lottery tickets? Let's just step into their shoes for a second. From an outsider's perspective, maybe someone who's financially comfortable, buying a lottery ticket looks like a terrible math error. It looks like someone irresponsibly blowing their very last safety net on a 1 in a million chance. But look at the insider's view. If higher wages, nice vacations, and a home in a safe neighborhood feels statistically impossible to reach in your current reality, a lottery ticket isn't a financial calculation. It's a highly rational purchase of a dream. It's buying the only tangible hope of getting the good stuff that wealthy people already just take for granted. You don't have to agree with the financial logic to understand the profound, very real human behavior behind it. And honestly, we really shouldn't be too hard on ourselves for making emotional or flawed money decisions. Because as you can see here, modern financial tools are incredibly young. The very first Social Security check went out in 1940. The 401k, which is literally the backbone of modern American retirement, was only invented in 1978. The Roth IRA? That wasn't born until 1998. Historically speaking, these concepts are basically infants. We are all just clumsy beginners trying to adapt our ancient, emotion-driven brains to a brand new system. All right, let's move into our final and perhaps most critical section, luck and risk. These are the invisible siblings that secretly govern the massive gap between the effort we put in and the outcomes we actually get. Let's take Bill Gates back in 1968. Out of roughly 303 million high school-aged teenagers globally, about 18 million lived in the US. And by a sheer funnel of geographical and historical chance, only about 300 students attended Lakeside School in Seattle. Lakeside happened to be one of the only high schools in the entire world that had an advanced computer in 1968, famously paid for by the School Mothers Club rummage sale. Even Gates himself openly admits that his staggering success was heavily built on this 1 in a million head start. Yes, he was brilliant, for sure. Yes, he was ambitious, but he also had an unbelievable 1 in a million stroke of pure luck to have unlimited access to a computer years before the rest of his generation. But we have to consider the other side of the coin. Think about Gates' best friend in 8th grade, a kid named Kent Evans. By Gates' own account, Kent was the best student in the class. He had the exact same ambition, the same incredible business mind, and the same technical skill as Bill Gates. They literally schemed about their future together. Kent Evans could have easily been a founding partner of Microsoft. Tragically, Evans never even graduated high school. He passed away in a fatal mountaineering accident. The odds of being killed on a mountain while in high school in the US? Roughly 1 in a million. So, while Bill Gates experienced this massive 1 in a million tailwind of luck, Kent Evans experienced the dark, opposing force of risk at the exact same magnitude. Which brings us to this striking duality. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Because luck and risk are just so deeply interwoven into our lives, we have to be incredibly humble when judging our own successes. We have to recognize those tailwinds we didn't create. And at the same time, we need to be deeply empathetic when judging the failures of others, knowing they might have just been struck by the invisible force of risk. So, as you go out and navigate your own financial journey, I want to leave you with this final thought to really challenge your biases. When you look at your bank account, your career progression, or your investments, how much of your financial outcome is actually repeatable skill, and how much of it is just a coin flip? I encourage you to reconsider the hidden forces shaping your life, focus on controlling your own behavior, and perhaps most importantly, give yourself and everyone else a little bit of grace.